your fundamental responsibility among them is to make sure that you have a viable organization that can exist forever.
Welcome to Real Leadership, the show that cuts through the clutter to spotlight leaders who make, move, and process things in the real economy. This isn't about buzzwords or theories. It's about bold decisions, solving challenges, and the strategies driving industries that matter. I'm Jim Weaver, CEO of the Owner Group. In every episode, we get real about what it takes to turn vision into action and obstacles into opportunities. Let's go. All right, today, for our first episode of Season 3, we have a great one. Tom Shoupe, a longtime manufacturing executive, advisor, and former executive vice president and chief operating officer of Honda of America Manufacturing. Over a 33-year career, Tom held a wide variety of senior leadership roles, helping to shape the company's North American manufacturing strategy, culture, and helped build a lot of cars. Tom's path to manufacturing leadership was a bit unconventional. He began his career in public service as a legislative assistant to 2 members of Congress before joining Honda in 1988. There, he advanced through roles in corporate planning and government and community relationships, including a formative 2-year assignment in Japan focused on production control and new model development, an experience that shaped his global perspective and reinforced a leadership philosophy grounded in humility, curiosity, and respect for people. After returning to the U.S., Tom held senior manufacturing roles at Honda's East Liberty and Marysville auto plants, serving as plant manager and later vice president. In 2006, he was named senior vice president of Honda of America Manufacturing. In 2011, he served as president and CEO of Honda Manufacturing here in Alabama, becoming the first American to lead manufacturing operations at a Honda facility in North America. He later returned to Ohio as EVP and COO with Honda of America Manufacturing, a role he held until his retirement in 2021. Following his Honda career, Tom served as an executive consultant and advisor with BDO through May of 2025, and he's currently the principal of Shoupe Advisory Services, serves on the advisory board of the Industrial Project Innovation, and is on the board of trustees at Franklin University. His leadership and impact have been recognized with the Alabama Auto Manufacturing Associates Impact Award in both 2022 and 2025. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Hope I got all that right. It's an impressive track.
I hadn't heard that for a while, so it's a kind of nice reminder for me where I've been.
Yes. So
anyway.
You've had quite an interesting career with Honda. Walk us through your journey from auto industry, kind of greenhorn, to running this huge plant in Alabama as CEO and then moving back up to Marysville as COO of Honda of America. Kind of walk us through the arc of those 33 years.
All right. I'll do my best, and please feel free to interrupt me and so forth as we go along. But, as you said, I had the opportunity to join Honda in March of 1988, which is a long time ago. And when I joined Honda, I was a transplanted Buckeye, living in Virginia, working in D.C. And the main reason I went to Washington was because when I graduated from high school, Ohio was the Rust Belt. And there weren't a lot of job opportunities there. And after I graduated college, I decided I wanted to experience something different in D.C. Well, one of the guys I ended up working for was a guy named Mike Oxley, who was the Ox in Socks, the famous legislation that Sarbanes-Oxley, a great guy on the Energy and Commerce Committee. And he had this kind of startup operation in his district called Honda. And Honda was relatively new to Ohio, been building cars about 5 years or so when I got to meet him through Mike's office and my responsibilities there. Worked with him on some different things over the following year or so, and one day got a telephone call, and after giving the senior VP at Honda an update on all the projects I was working on for him, she said, "Thank you, but that's not why I was calling. We think you're a Buckeye and you need to come back."
Wow.
And they had already talked to Congressman Oxley about that, obviously. And so one thing led to the other. I got to know this company, Honda. I was from Cincinnati area, so I didn't know too much about Central Ohio at the time, but Honda was the first company to do what they were doing and be successful at it, which was to commit major resources to build an operation to make cars and motorcycles and engines in the United States at a time when other manufacturers were leaving those regions of Ohio. Yeah, they were the first. Volkswagen tried it in Pennsylvania, but kind of closed up shop rather quickly. And Honda was committed to sustaining it. And so I came into Honda. They had been building cars for about 5.5 years, and they were in the midst of launching their third line of auto production. And that was one of my first projects. And it literally was one of those situations where I felt enormously comfortable from the beginning with Honda based on the philosophical approach of the company. And the international viewpoint, as we called it back then. And just the simple philosophies of Mr. Honda that had penetrated the growth of the organizations from 1948 when it started.
Double click on that. I love the Honda philosophy. Double click on that a little bit.
Well, for me, it was really natural. And some of the Japanese mentors I had used to tell me that they could tell it was natural for me. And I kind of considered it was like breathing air. In a way, it was simple and basic and foundational and fundamental. And a lot of the things that were key components of Honda's philosophy were things that I felt like I had learned growing up. The son of a minister and a school teacher in Southern Ohio, where they're very common items, but because they're so common and basic, I felt like a lot of times people weren't really living up to those things. And that's why it was so important to have those simple fundamentals locked in and give you some kind of common basis to build off of.
What were those simple Honda fundamentals?
Well, two of the basic foundations of Honda's philosophy were what translated into English were called respect for the individual. Mr. Honda's firm belief and his partner, Mr. Fujisawa's firm belief that each individual was important. Each individual had a contribution to the total objective of the team, and they should be respected and promoted and motivated accordingly. So we would spend hours, by the way, breaking down what these things meant. English, Japanese, Japanese, English, and back and forth. And in those early days, a lot of the executives would stop meetings and hit a point. This is an important point of Honda philosophy, respect for the individual. And when we would be discussing concrete policy issues, they would stop and link it right back to the foundation of the philosophy. The second foundational item that I thought was really fascinating to me was what Mr. Honda called the three joys. And one reason why it was so fascinating to me, because the word from Japanese translated into joy in English, you didn't hear that word outside of church very often in the United States. You didn't hear people say, I have great joy, Anyway, so it attracted my attention from the beginning. And then the more I understood about it, and again, it's simple, but his belief was every human being who somehow is touched or touches the product that he provides should feel joy, whether they're buying that product, whether they're using it, whether they're selling it, or whether they're designing and making it. So the joy of manufacturing, the joy of selling, the joy of buying and using. And I thought that was so wonderful.
That is
way of
amazing.
thinking about it. He was obsessed with adding value through what God had gifted him to provide to the world, basically. And of course, he wasn't coming necessarily from a God or religious-based viewpoint per se, but to me, it was really tightly connected with that kind of fundamental philosophy about the value of human beings and the value of creating and giving something to the world that created value.
So was that kind of countercultural in Japan? I think of like Confucian, and I'm no expert, but Confucian philosophy is about the group.
Yeah.
And I think of Japanese as very stoic almost, and both of those things, the individual, the focus on the individual and the joy piece, it seems from an outsider seems to be a little was it countercultural? Or am I just off?
Yeah, no question. His entire existence was countercultural for Japan. So he had done various things. He has a fascinating history, by the way. I encourage you, if you're interested, to look him up, or what do they say now? Google him or whatever.
Yeah, actually, I Gemini'd him.
Oh, you did? You Gemini'd him. Oh, yeah, that's great. Well, I actually, by the way, side story, had a chance to meet him.
Wow.
And spent about the better part of 5 days on his last trip to the United States with he and his wife.
Wow.
And he was everything you read about. He couldn't speak English very well, but he could communicate with everybody he met by some way. And I learned later when I lived in Japan that one of my tenets of my fundamental philosophy is you can communicate with anybody regardless of language or any barrier if you have the heart to do it. You can find a way, whether it's body language, napkin writing, pictures, whatever it is. And I saw that demonstrated in the short time I spent with he and his wife. And he was just a fascinating guy, and one of those guys that walked into a room and you could feel the energy level instantly go up. You could feel it. And so that was a great opportunity for me to see the philosophy in action, so to speak, if you would, right there up front, even though he was toward the end of his life at the time. He died 2 years later after I met him. But anyway, he was countercultural. He was more of an engine guy, and the company at its heart remains an engine company. That's the heart and soul of Honda, and it's because of him. And he didn't get to have all the education he wanted. But he had to have a job. He started his own company at one point. He was a piston maker.
Yes.
Got frustrated with the system, working under Toyota or whoever it was, and decided he was going to sell that company out, which he did, and he got bored, and he decided to start up another company and ended up calling it Honda Motor Company with a partner who was really good at the selling part and the marketing part. Named Fujisawa, who was also a fascinating guy. But
it seems like Honda's very grounded in their philosophy. It's interesting. I visited Chick-fil-A and got to meet some of their people. This is a couple of years ago, and it was interesting to me, the being closed on Sunday and their whole philosophical framework was not codified in the beginning. They went along for 20 years, and then it sort of naturally revealed itself, and then they codified it when they kind of needed to. And was that the way, that philosophy? Do you know if that's how that developed at Honda, or was it, when he started that company? No, he sketched out, exactly what his philosophy and operating principles were, and okay, I'm going to build a customer. Do you know?
Yeah, I think they started the company in 1948. And basically, over a period of about the next 5 years, they formalized their philosophy. They gathered it up. I think they had the fundamental philosophy, but they felt like it was important to be able to capture it in a way that they could explain it to all of their, as Honda called, associates, which was not a common term at the time to call your employee an associate. And so about 1954, I believe, is when I remember that they kind of put it together and rolled it out. And it was countercultural. I mean, I don't know how many people remember this, but Japan had a plan after the war. They had an industrial plan, an economic plan. And if you will, Honda was not part of that. It was okay if Honda wanted to make engines and pistons and motorbikes, because, Mr. Honda started the company by putting surplus engines on bicycles. That was kind of where he saw an opportunity, but he was one of 649 companies to try to do that, because post-war Japan, very difficult. And he survived. And I think one reason he felt like he survived is he had a vision. He had a fundamental philosophy and belief system that people could easily grasp. And it was countercultural because Japan didn't really want him to make cars. And he basically said, well, my vision is I'm going to make cars. And he made a car and it was quite successful. And one thing led to the other. But ultimately, he dreamed of any kind of way of moving people. It evolved into what Honda really was beyond an engine company or a car company. It was a mobility company. Yeah. And that's how we got into humanoid robot research and all kinds of things to do to help handicapped people or aging people and airplanes. As a result of that, he always dreamed of having an airplane and being part of the aeronautics industry. Yeah, it really is. And so anyway, a lot of that was grounded and rooted in that fundamental philosophy that they captured. And he had this is one thing that was really important to me as I was learning about the company and so forth was they constantly emphasized their kind of corporate statement to me, and they called it a company principle. Right. And at the time in Washington, I was working with a lot of companies, and they weren't the same. They struck me as very different. And in Japan, they were the same way. I didn't know that at the time, but they were different from their competitors in many ways. And when I joined the company, that statement was maintaining an international viewpoint. We are dedicated to providing products of the highest efficiency at a reasonable cost for worldwide customer satisfaction. And they changed that a little bit, the English, to maintaining a global viewpoint over the time I was at Honda. And the word quality maybe got substituted back and forth with efficiency, because the word in Japanese for those things it's a much broader meaning than the English. And so anyway, I thought that was really cool because we would break that statement down and study it. What did this mean? And the executives would talk about that to everybody. If you were an assembly line worker, you heard that. You were taught about it and what it meant. It was so important.
Okay, give me an example of how that goes down with an assembly line worker. It's just fascinating. It's one thing to have this aspirational philosophy. It's another to execute at that scale. So how does that?
Yeah, I think it was very difficult. I think there was a lot of effort constantly going on communication, the two-way back and forth. They called it two-way, which the Japanese used to always laugh and say, Tom-san, why do we have to say two-way communication? Because shouldn't we understand that communication requires two-way? Why do we have to say it? And I'm like, that's a good question. But there was a lot of that kind of thing in my career where the Japanese would ask me something culturally that would stop me in my tracks, and I would have to think about, why do we do that? Why do we say that? And it was a great, stimulating learning process for me for 33 years. But basically, so we would break it down. That's what they called it. We would break down the communication. It would start at the highest levels, and it would permeate the management ranks. And then we would ask the management ranks to get engaged with their associates one-on-one in small groups and just break down the philosophy.
Okay, so the direction was, look, we need to find every opportunity to talk about this, about who we are.
Yeah, and if a problem came up, I would hear in the management meeting, a lot of times, especially in the early days, managers would hit a point, they might be angry, something bad happened or whatever, but they would constantly try to circle back and say, this is the quality principle in our company statement, exhibited right here. Everybody, please understand. And they would spend more time discussing that point than they would sometimes the countermeasure for the problem, because there was another forum for that. And they would try to go to an extreme to help every person in Honda understand how they connected to the customer, or they connected to the product or whatever. And that was exhaustive. And it involved executives would make public speeches 3 and 4 times a year to all the associates. And I used to go, for example, to every plant, and there would be 4 and 5 speeches at each plant where there was you see me in person, I see you in person. And a lot of times there was an opportunity to come up afterwards and ask questions directly to the CEO or the COO or if you saw us walking in what we called the gemba, the gemba, which is the Japanese word for the present place, the present spot, we called it. And that was another breakout or breakdown of Honda's philosophy is he called Sangen Shugi, the three principles. One of those was you go to the actual spot, you talk to the actual people, and you look at the actual parts and situation.
Perfect. Yeah.
And that's something that I obviously found missing so often. And it didn't matter if you were Japanese, American, Canadian. That's something that people just glaze over so much, not just in manufacturing, but in life.
Yes.
I see that a lot where people aren't practicing Sangen Shugi. Anyway, it's those kind of things where they're simple and they're in a way that people could remember them. You know, if you're on the floor and you're busy assembling something all day, you don't need a lot of clutter in your mind. You need to think actual spot, actual people, actual situation.
Yes.
And if you can grasp that quickly, you have a much better chance of responding with speed.
Yes.
To fix something, or because the average assembly line worker has about 54 to 60 some seconds before the next car comes. So to be able, if you're going to catch something or countermeasure something, you got to be quick about it. So.
Yes. That was a great tangent. Let's go pick back up on your career path. So tell me about the 2 years you spent in Japan.
I almost forgot the original question.
That was great. And, you hit about 4 questions I planned to ask you in that one. So
well, it's interesting. How did I end up in Japan goes back maybe to a little bit more about that journey, because what I found at Honda when I joined there is that things were moving so fast. The company was growing so fast. For example, when I arrived at Honda, they had 30 original equipment manufacturing suppliers. That's companies developed here that provide parts for the vehicles. And they had an objective to increase local content and to develop supply base that could be almost independent of Japan, unheard of at the time. So we went in a few short years from those 30 suppliers to over 650. And so the amount of effort and energy that went into that was an example of how we were growing in production volume, everything. And what that created was a lot of gaps and therefore a lot of opportunities for people who had that curiosity, that fundamental philosophical approach to say, oh, there's a problem and it's not my area, but I'm going to dive in and see if I can help. And the Japanese used to say it was my nature, that I was wired to do that anyway. And it fit right into Honda philosophy. And I think a lot of what happened to me at Honda was whatever that orientation was and however that clicked together, I felt this tremendous motivation to dive in and help. And part of that too was if I saw something and I mentioned it or I complained about it, my bosses were quick to say, "You're in charge of that.
I love
Please take your idea and run."
I'll use that trick.
Which was a wonderful thing. I've talked to my son about this a lot, quite a bit, and others that will listen is being in the right place at the right time with the right attitude is irreplaceable. Because here I was a liberal arts major who decided against going to law school, which was my original path, because of different things. What this approach and this situation I was in created an opportunity for me to seize other opportunities and to learn that I really was more interested in the pure business, even the manufacturing, which I am not an engineer. That's interesting. And so one thing led to the other. I was migrating toward the production control area, which was business or strategy and control. And one day my boss said, "Hey, we had a meeting. I gave him an update on a project. He asked me how I got to Japan." And as we're walking back to my desk, he stops me and turns into me about 2 inches from my face. And he said to me, "Now," he goes, "I appreciate your update, but we need to know if you and Lisa will consider moving to Japan next year and becoming the leader of our task group over there. That's to gather new model know-how and bring it back here. It's critical.
Wow.
And we want you to lead it, and we'd like you and Lisa to go." And I said, "Whoa." And I felt, my mouth got dry and everything. And I said, he goes, do you have an answer right now? And I said, well, I kind of need to talk to Lisa because you don't know this, but we just found out that she's pregnant with our first child and there's things to consider. And he says to me, they have babies in Japan. Next concern. And I can't tell you what my boss did the next day, who reported to him how she lit him up about that comment. But both of them are dear friends of mine to this day. Yeah. And anyway, there's all kinds of stories like that. But that's how I ended up going to Japan. And one thing led to the other. And Lisa and I took our 5-month-old baby and moved there and lived for 2 years. And there's not a day of my life where I don't reflect on something that happened to me in that 2-year experience that caused me to grow or learn or critically evaluate the way I thought about things. And it became, I think it helped accelerate me into a lifetime practice of constantly comparing, evaluating, thinking more deeply about me and why was I doing what I was doing the way I was doing it. Because I got that question so often in Japan. And then I would start questioning myself because I traveled over there a lot by myself. And then after living there, I went back and my boss, who I just mentioned, decided to move on to something else. And she said, Shoupe, I got a gift I want to give you. And I'm like, oh, what kind of gift? Yeah. Sad that she's leaving. And she said, I'm going to give you the greatest gift I can give you. You're going to go work in manufacturing. And I was like, what? Mouth got dry. I'm like, are you kidding me? And lo and behold, that's when I went to what was called the East Liberty factory, where I had worked on the project to help set the plant up as a business person. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll go to manufacturing, couple years experience, and then I'll go back to corporate. Yeah. Well, I get to manufacturing and it's an awakening in so many different ways. And the people over there embraced me. They called me an office Twinkie for the longest time because I actually wore a pink shirt into manufacturing one day and I got really ridiculed. This was the 90s.
Is that how you got the name, the nickname? Was it after that?
I think so. They didn't call me that to my face at first, but then it was similar to my past practice. I thought, well, I can bide my time here, or I can take advantage of this gift. And I can learn everything I can and figure out what's the next pathway, kind of thing. Still a very fast and dynamic growing company. So I ended up working for a great boss, and we were 180 degrees opposite. He was an engineer. He was very aggressive, very, and I was the guy who would go in after he had been aggressive and say, what he meant to say was this way, and this is what he meant to do after he tore the door off the hinges. Yeah. Learned a tremendous amount from him also, and still a close friend of mine. He calls me in the office one day and he goes, I'm supposed to tell you that, I'm moving jobs. I'm going to the other bigger plant. And there's got to be a replacement for me. And I thought he was going to tell me, and you're going back to corporate side to pick up your business career. Yeah. He said, and so next month you're going to become assistant plant manager. And in 3 months after that, you're going to be plant manager of this plant. And I sat there and looked at him, mouth dry, looked at him and I said, are you kidding me? And he got a little agitated by that. Yeah. I tell this story because it's an example of how unlikely it was for me to be in the position and how I interpreted it. But about a week later, I was visiting with my dad, who was he had cancer, and it ended up being the last visit I had with my dad. And I'm sitting on the edge of the bed with him, and I said, Dad, I've got some news about work. And he's like, oh, what is it now? Because he was used to me constantly changing at Honda, and he loved Honda. I said, believe it or not, they've asked me to stay at East Liberty, but they want me to become the plant manager. And it was a dead silence. It seemed like forever. Yeah. And finally he looks over at me very slowly and he says, are you kidding me? And he goes, you wouldn't even change your own oil when you were growing up. And I said, well, Dad, I don't think that's what they want me to do. Yeah. And but I tell that story because that was my constant experience where I would get in these situations where a new assignment would come to me and I would be like, you got to be kidding me. Right. I'm just a Butler County, Ohio kid that, started out this way. I don't know anything. Yeah. I remember telling my boss at one point, he goes, one promotion, tomorrow you're going to be made manager of 2 different departments. and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, mouth dry. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, this is a shocker. And he said, I said, I don't know anything about managing anything.
Yeah.
Scott.
Yeah.
And he said, you'll learn. This is the guy who said they have babies in Japan.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And he looked right at me and he says, you'll learn. Next question.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm in. Let's go learn. And the thing that motivated me to do that was that orientation I had been brought up with, coupled with that dynamic Honda philosophy and that Honda spirit kind of thing. I think that motivated me to say, I want to be a part of this. I want to help everybody, all my teammates. I want to help them. And if I'm not helping them, push me out of the way, kind of thing. And then after the East Liberty thing, came Marysville, which was 6,500 people, 2 lines of production, 2,000 cars a day, which blew my mind. It was another growth learning experience. And then into the corporate and executive world after that. And, traveled to Japan over 100 times.
Wow.
Separate from living there, and love it, consider it my second home in many ways, and miss it somewhat.
And then you ran the big plant in Lincoln.
In Lincoln. That was 2011. I was asked by my boss to be the first non-Japanese president of a Honda company, and that was a interesting experience from start to finish. And was on the regional operating board for several years, was the first American on that, and stayed on it for about 13 or 14 years in that role. And in that role, I had oversight of all North American sales, marketing, design, and manufacturing. Wow. Not directly, but as a corporate board member. And then had as when I retired, I was responsible for all North American production operations. Yes. Which was quite a big responsibility. I used to try not to think about it because it involved 40,000 people. And you think about, how do you possibly touch 40,000 people? And it's amazing the things you can come up with.
How do you?
Well, I decided this actually when I was sent to the Marysville plant. I was asking myself, okay, I go from a plant of 2,800 to a plant of 65 to 7,000. If you count contractors on site, 10,000 people. Mm-hmm. And it was not a super great morale situation, and I was asked to tackle that. And there was noise about the union coming and all that. And walking around during the Christmas shutdown that year before I became plant manager, it just hit me one day. I decided I was really struggling with this. How am I going to touch these people? And then I realized, oh, wait, it's not just about you, number one. It's about the army of people, that you have available to you. But number two, I'm going to go one by one. I'm going to go one by one like I always have. And I'm going to consider every interaction an opportunity. And that became my rally cry. And I started to use that phrase.
Every action,
every interaction is an opportunity.
Yes.
And I have people to this day who sometimes will message me on LinkedIn and say, EIO, Tom. And it takes me a second. I'm like, oh, every interaction's an opportunity, because we called it EIO. Yeah. And it just caught on. And so all the management team, everybody started trying to do that same thing. And we started reteaching Honda philosophy, and we started reteaching the fundamentals of our business. And the one thing, rocket science thing that we did was we decided we were going to have 2-way roundtable meetings. And I was going to randomly pick people from all 3 shifts, and we were going to take as long as it was necessary, and we were going to listen to how they felt. And every item that brought up, we made an exhaustive follow-up plan. And it was delegated. It wasn't me every time. Sure. Sometimes it was me. Sometimes, oh, my new assembly manager, you have an opportunity to go meet this associate on my behalf, please. And that's one of my 5 fundamentals of management and leadership. And it's rocket science. Follow up and follow through.
Yeah.
It sounds so simple that people gloss over it all the time. But I've seen that be the lack of that be a result of huge problems between people, where communication gets messed up and people think you don't respect them, and they're not motivated to do, their job at the highest level. Yeah. Just based on some small thing that occurs. But But yeah, that's another thing I learned from my particularly manufacturing experience, but in general, your ability to touch people is changed by the position you have and how they perceive it. Maybe not how you perceive it, but how they perceive it. And I always wanted to be mindful of that because I realized at an early stage in my manufacturing career that one way I could touch people as the plant manager was to smile and wave to them. That sounds crazy, but I can't tell you how many people sent me messages about the time that I spoke kindly to them in a passing, or I waved and smiled at them, and how it lifted their morale to know that A, I was on the floor where they are working and doing the actual job, and B, I acknowledged they were there. And it used to make me kind of sad to think that, wait a minute, that's all it took for me? And so another principle of my management leadership was head on a swivel. When you're in the environment, whether it's in the office or out in manufacturing or wherever you are, your head should always be on a swivel. So when I go to Publix now, it's ingrained in me. The head's on a swivel. And when I fail in something like that, even today, I take it very seriously. And then I realize, I was too busy, or I had my head in my phone and I missed this person that was trying to interact with me about something. So anyway, I think those kind of things for me were rooted in the philosophy, but also I believe God chose to develop me over time.
Recruiting top talent is tough. Onan Staffing focuses on people, offering exceptional benefits to attract and retain dedicated workers. Partner with us for flexible, data-driven solutions. Visit onanstaffing.com to learn more.
So when we met the first time, we figured out that we're members of the same church, big church, so we hadn't run into each other. But so how has your faith, how has your walk with Christ shaped you as a leader, shaped your philosophy as a leader? Tremendously.
I mean, overall, just in ways that I didn't even understand because again, the pace of my people leadership was so fast, and there were so many things going on, and it was so easy to lose that aspect, that kind of foundational role that God was playing in all of this, and working in a culture where it was primarily Shinto or Buddhist people I was working with, or people who weren't all that really religious, who were Americans or Canadians or whatever. But there was no question that God's hand was involved in everything. As far as my life was going, even to the point where I maybe wasn't asking him at that moment, or I wasn't really focused on that relationship as much as I should have been, or whatever. I still knew his hand was there, and I could feel it. And in the low moments, of course, I was in close connection. And then in the high moments, not always like I should have been, but at the same time, there's so many times where a little prayer or a little thought, even during a meeting about a business issue, sometimes was something that kind of sustained me and helped me realize. But I think the upbringing that I had and the investment that people were making in me, sometimes, like I said, I didn't even realize what they were doing, helped reinforce that. Even, believe it or not, from the Japanese, because we started down this way a little bit, but they generally were not Christian, or they were not, particularly religious, most of my Japanese friends, but they were spiritual people, and they are spiritual people. And I found out later some of them had converted and become Christians. And I found that out by accident once. And two of them that had become Christians ended up being two of my early bosses and mentors. And we never discussed it until they retired. And I found out that it was kind of like one of those things where I suspected, or I knew that you knew that I knew that you knew. And we never really, and I felt bad about that at some point, about why didn't I just go there? But I felt like for me in that situation, it was better for them to perceive that part of faith from my life, maybe more than my kind of like banging it into their face or something. I think that's what I was thinking, whether that's right or wrong. I'm not sure, but I did have a number of experiences where colleagues over time would ask me, are you a Christian? Oh, you're a Christian, aren't you? And people on the floor who were Americans or Japanese, we would be engaging in a post-meeting, cup of coffee. And it was amazing how many opportunities came up, and not based on me, wearing something on my, or I used to tease with some people that I must have had a cross hologram on my forehead, because people on the floor would ask me that a lot. You're a Christian, aren't you? And I'd be like, yeah.
Yeah.
How did you know that? Oh, I can tell.
Wow.
But on the other hand, when somebody would say that to me, I would start introspecting and thinking, why did that make me hesitate for a second when they asked me that? Why did I hesitate? And some of it was maybe being in the environment we were in, which was purely secular. And of course, you were constantly being told, you can't talk to people about this, and you can't, But anyway, it was a driving force of my entire life. And even my wife and I celebrated our wedding anniversary yesterday, and we were having that very conversation about our marriage of so long, that we both knew that God's hand was on that, as his hand's been on everything, going forward. And so anyway, you kind of, I guess, couldn't get me without that.
Sure.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
And vice versa. What sometimes bothers me more, just to finish a point on that, as I think back about things, is, did people ask me that enough? Did people understand without me necessarily handing them a track or something like that? That process of, did I do enough to make that clear to people or not, is something I wondered about and still do. Even in my daily life at Publix or whatever.
Absolutely. I've been reading, have you ever read Warren Bennis's book on becoming a leader?
Yeah, a long time ago, I think.
That's a great book. It's an old book. It's a great book. And I've been thinking a lot about the distinction between leadership and management. So that's my question. So how do you think about that distinction between leadership and management?
Well, the thing I always heard is, as I told you, I got made a manager, but I didn't know what it was really. And that was probably a blessing in more ways than one, because I started studying a lot, and then I started trying to apply what I knew. And I realized, honestly, in my opinion, it didn't take as much to manage stuff, that I could manage things, the P's and Q's, dot the I's, cross the T's. What I really needed to work on was, how did I inspire and motivate the people that worked with me to have them embrace the mission and the objective, and how they were a key part of that, and how that might change over time. That which is not really seen as a management type of function. So people used to tell me, well, managers do things right and leaders do the right thing. And I realized very quickly, really with the first large team I was asked to manage, that they didn't really need me to manage.
Right.
They needed me. They
need more than you.
Yeah, that's right. They needed me to make sure we were, checking things periodically, or those kind of management functions. But what they really were looking to me for was inspiration, guidance, more longer term type of thought process, and to know that I could see the big picture and break that down for them, so they saw how they fit in it. And that's very difficult to do, because I don't think it's something that people are normally wired to do. You have to stretch yourself to try to figure that out. And the one piece, a lot of people I've seen are good at maybe casting the picture, but they're not good at showing you how you fit and maybe what your steps are to that, which gets a little bit into how bad we typically are in human development because of that.
Yeah, tell me more about that. Was actually where I was going. So how do you think about leadership development? What is the company's role? What is a C-level leader's role in the development of leadership within the organization?
Yeah, I always saw it as, and interesting that you asked that, because one of the final things I worked really hard on was that very topic, because I felt it was such an important responsibility for senior executive for the future generations and guaranteeing the future of the company.
Yeah.
So I think it's multifaceted, but I think it starts with, as a leader, you understanding and accepting that that's your fundamental responsibility. Your fundamental responsibility among them is to make sure that you have a viable organization that can exist forever.
Yes.
And it can grow and adapt,
yes.
As it needs to. And the key to that is not the hardware,
right.
It's the people.
Yeah.
And it's the investment that you make in those people, whether it's systematic or it's not systematic, because I've seen both. The problem I see sometimes is systematic doesn't take hold for some reason because the leaders change and their priorities are different. Maybe it's very important for me to pick my successor or successors and to lay out that 5 or 10 year plan of who those people are based on leadership characteristics and not management characteristics.
Right.
To make sure that they understand the importance of humans to the future and how they have a role to define what they think those humans should be like as leaders, and then how to help them achieve that. Which is more the concrete development side. So we started a North American leadership development program in my last 5 years there in particular. We'd had it off and on, but once again, hard to sustain.
Yes.
I walked away to a different assignment and it kind of went downhill. I'm not saying it's because of me, but because I thought it was important. When I went back to Ohio, we reinstituted it. And I found out it was something that was missing in the Gemba. The people that had been trained and developed to be those types of leaders weren't leading, in my judgment, in the way that we had wanted them to do. And it caused a great concern for me.
So you said it was interesting. They were trained and developed. Like, I actually don't think I can't develop leadership in somebody else. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's kind of what I'm arriving at. Like, it's got to be like drawn out. Like a leader, Bennis has a great quote. He said, a leader learns from others, but they are not made by others.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
That is inherently what it means to be a leader. So
that's
like,
right.
How do you as an organization spark that or draw it out? That's kind of seems like the magic.
That when you were saying that, that's the exact word that popped into my head was the spark. How can you, and I believe everybody has a spark. And you just got to find out what lights.
You think everybody has a leadership spark?
In some degree. I'm not saying everybody has a 40,000 people responsibility leadership spark, but I do believe, and that's the fundamental of Honda philosophy, is you are the leader of your area.
So I agree with you.
You have a leader, but you're expected to be a leader.
Yeah.
And
even if it's just leading yourself.
Yeah. And part of that is very important. Self-discipline shows leadership, or that thing that I can't really describe where it came from, but about me pitching in as a young associate and then even as an executive, where I would go do something and people would be like, "What are you doing here? You don't need to help us." Trying to help ship cars on the weekend. And there are different reasons why they didn't want me there, but I would be out there and I would offer to drive the cars. I would do this. And people were like, "What are you doing here? This is our job," and you got to be careful about that at some level. But I do think that spark is there. And that was one of the first challenges. The first group I was asked to manage that had a significant number of people, there were a lot of them that had never been developed. They'd never been encouraged. They'd never been cultivated to be what I felt like some of them could be. And some of them, you could see, they could be higher level leaders, and some could be leaders of a smaller area or leaders of themselves.
Yes.
But we weren't tapping that spark, and we were less than 10 years old. Yeah. And that spark was not, it wasn't even an ember.
Yes.
I would find by different methods, I would throw something out and see if somebody picked it up. And then I realized that's what people were doing to me. Also.
I was just thinking that is exactly your path. They're throwing it out like, okay, next problem.
And I realized that we used to call that, I forget the Jinglish term that we had for it, but learning by doing, but basically the value of developing and learning in the job was more valuable than any training you could ever have.
Yes.
You know, because you're in there, you're facing real situations, and you have to ask for help, or you have to, you have to do something. And there's a lot of times where we would do training of all kinds of different things. And one of the real weak points I realized when I went back to Ohio was, we've done all this training and everybody's still treating the training like this is Jinglish, a one-time touchdown.
Yes.
Because the way I could get the Japanese to understand that was I drew a picture of a tornado. Mm-hmm. And a tornado touches down one time and then it's gone. Or, maybe in general. And the other picture I drew was a picture of all 4 seasons of the year. Summer, fall, winter. Yeah. And I said, we're trying to get away from this and into this. And the Japanese were like, oh my gosh, this is great. And they go off and they make a beautiful Microsoft PowerPoint picture of what I scribbled on the whiteboard because my handwriting's still terrible. But that came from hours of discussion.
Yes.
The idea just came in. Here's what I'm frustrated about. Everybody says they want this or that, but we're not clear, as simple as it is, we're not clear enough on what we're trying to achieve. And we don't want people to come in to develop and have it be a one-time thing and they put it in their desk drawer.
Yes.
And they never
check
practice
the box.
And they never teach it to other people, or they never use it as a way to light the spark. And so, because you never know, it's like every interaction is an opportunity. You never know what somebody else is thinking about, what they're struggling with, and how the smallest gesture on your part can tap that energy. And a lot of times that energy, it's like a pilot light. It's just kind of going. And I know the one case where I did it in my first management job, and this one person responded. I could see it in her eyes. I could see it in her smile. I could see it was like that. I did that.
Yeah.
I did that.
That's fun.
Yeah, you did that. She saw my reaction to what she had done based on a request I made, and she just lit up like a Christmas tree. Yeah. And I went home and told my wife about it. You're not going to believe this.
Yeah.
But this person, and I think looking back on it, that's a key to how we as humans develop and how we build confidence. I could see visibly by every indication that her confidence level went up that day. And it reminded me of a show I saw once. This was when I was studying management on my own. I happened to see this show, a random show one day. I love dogs and I love border collies. Yeah. And I don't have one, but I had one when I was a kid.
I had one when I was a kid too.
Oh, they're great dogs. Smart. What they call them, the Einsteins of dogs. Yeah. Well, I saw this old New Zealand farmer on a show once. It was, I don't know, National Geographic, something. Just happened to be on TV while I was stretching out to go for a run. And I became interested because they're talking to this New Zealand farmer about how he trains the dogs and the characteristics of the dogs and all this stuff. They use time-lapse photography because he gave them a rocket science point. He said, not every border collie becomes a sheepdog. And I remember the reporter going, what? Every border collie's not a sheepdog?
Yeah.
Oh, no. He said, you put the dogs in around the sheep, and then they would show these videos of these border collie puppies that were running around, and they thought the sheep were like dogs or whatever, and they would play with them and they would jump all over them. And through the time-lapse photography, he showed the reporter there's a moment in time when a border collie becomes a sheepdog. And when they recognize that the sheep is a sheep, is that moment. And they captured it on film. And I just thought it was fascinating because from the moment the border collie recognized the sheep, his entire life changed, his body language changed, and he became a sheepdog and could never go back. And I told my wife, and she's like, why are you wasting our time watching this? And I said, this is fascinating because this is not so different than how humans grow. Because that person or me in the case, when we have a moment like that, we're changed. And we start to think, I can do that. I can do this. Or I can jump in here, or I can do. And I think that process is extremely valuable, but it's extremely hard to ingrain in the leader's mind that that's your main job.
Right.
You've got to light that spark. You've got to find what it is. You've got to recognize when you're not lighting the spark. And you've got to figure out how to do that. And I think it comes out of something overall that I think a lot of people call servant leadership.
Yes.
But to me, this was another big battle among managers and leaders at Honda in my life. But a whiteboard discussion where I was extremely frustrated, and the non-engineer among all the engineers, getting so tired of being the people guy that's always speaking about Honda philosophy. And I felt like people were just constantly challenging and hammering me, and, not on the floor at the higher levels. And I came back from a meeting once so frustrated, and my Japanese friend could tell instantly. He goes, "Come on, let's go in the room." We went to the whiteboard and explained to me. And I started explaining, and I drew two simple images. One was a pyramid and one was an inverted pyramid. And I said, "Here's the problem." And I said, "If I'm wrong, I'll move out of the way. But if I'm not wrong, I'm going to fight." And he's looking at me like, "Well, please don't do anything drastic." And I drew a circle at the top of the regular pyramid, and I drew a circle at the bottom. And I said, "I think the problem is most people I work with at this point in time, for whatever reason, and most Americans view this is how an organization is. It's hierarchical. I can't say that, but there's a hierarchy, and the leader's at the top and oversees everything and gives strong direction. And you do what I say." And I said, "The problem I have is my philosophy and the philosophy of Honda, I believe, is depicted by this one.
Upside down pyramid,
And I'm at the bottom, not the top. And I'm serving these people." And man, he got a pen and paper and started writing. We had a 4-hour discussion, and he goes to the president. And lo and behold, next thing I know, the president's calling me into the smoking area, which was popular back then, and wants to have a long discussion, and tells me that he 1,000% agrees with me, and he encourages me to move forward. And he said, because even in Japan, people do not grasp this. Please, Thompson, please, this is what we have to gain from international global approach. We need other ideas and viewpoints. And that basic concept got, blown into kind of work that was done then in Honda Motor in Japan. And my partner comes running in one day with a book and says, "This is the new training manual of Honda Motor. Look at page 32. It's Tom's own picture." and I was like, "What?" I mean, I said that because that picture's not rocket science. It's a simple idea, but it was the way that we could commonly communicate about the problem we were having. And then it provided a picture of how do we want to go forward? And how do we teach other people that this is the Honda way? And that's what we call Honda way leadership.
Beautiful.
And I hope that they're continuing that. I believe they are. But anyway, it's interesting. But again, for me, it's hard to separate that view from God's hand on my life because that's what I believed. Was your role as a leader.
Tom, we got to land this thing. I could talk all day, but we're, I have a bunch of other questions, but it's okay. Maybe we can do a part 2. So, you are Shoupe Advisory Services today. So you're working in a consulting capacity. So if people want to work more closely and get your expertise brought to bear on there, are you primarily, I assume, in the auto space?
I've done a lot of different things on an ad hoc basis, but manufacturing in general.
It certainly translates.
Yes, automotive parts, powertrains, but also manufacturing in general. But I also have a lot of experience and exposure in business and strategy. So I've had wide responsibilities in my career. So I understand cost management and how to make strategies and visions and all those kinds of things. And I think if someone has an interest in having that kind of advisory type relationship, I'm open to it. I kind of select, what I do and what I don't do.
How can folks connect with you on that? What's the best way? We'll put it in the show notes. But.
Probably the best way right now, I don't have a website. I'm not that sophisticated, I guess, on one hand, but probably best by my email.
Okay.
And it's pretty simple too, like me. It's teshoupe@yahoo.com.
Okay.
And then, obviously I have a phone and, carry my phone and iPad with me everywhere. But,
anyway. They can connect via email and you can take it from there. Very good.
Yep.
Well, Tom, it's been great.
Thank you.
Thank you so
same
much
here.
for
I
coming
appreciate
in.
you all having me and giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit with you. So,
all right, folks. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, keep it real. Thank you for listening. This podcast is powered by Onin, the staffing partner delivering real results for manufacturing, logistics, and food processing companies nationwide. To learn more, visit www.oningroup.com. Until next time, keep it real.